gifted motivational speaker and talented musician. George Dennehy's story is one of true grit, relentless resilience, and hard-won hope. Born without arms in an impoverished Romanian orphanage, George joins me now to share his personal story of both challenge and triumph. Welcome to 100 Huntley Street, George.
Thank you so much for having me. Coming on.
It's our honor to have you with us today. And you know, George, today you are a renowned public speaker, a minister of the gospel, a musician, a father with two beautiful kids. But going back to your early beginnings, they were very, very challenging. Tell us about that early stage of your life.
Yeah. So I was born in a small little Romanian village and born without arms. And because of that, I was put in an orphanage right after birth, and I was malnourished and kind of left alone and really essentially left to die in this orphanage. So yeah, it wasn't the greatest start to my life, but you know, the Lord had a plan, and God was working even in that dark place, and He was orchestrating my path. And eventually I was adopted at the age of 2 by my loving parents, and Mike and Sharon Dennehy, who just accepted me and brought me into their family and gave me a second chance at life.
Your parents are such great people. They're very interesting. You know, a part of their story is they had a few kids biologically, and then they decided to adopt from many countries throughout the world. Tell us, it's like the United Nations in your household. Tell us about the countries represented. Yeah.
You know, my parents, they had 3 biological kids, healthy children, and they were living a very nice, comfortable life, and the Lord really led them to this idea of adopting and just caring for the orphan and the widow in their distress, as James 1:28 calls us to, and that led them to adoption. So they adopted me first, and then they adopted 9 more children from countries like Ethiopia, India, China, Thailand, and in the U.S., right in the U.S. as well, where we're from. And so, yeah, they have 3 of their homemade cookies, and they have 10 store-bought cookies, and one big, sometimes happy family.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And, you know, you know, growing up, you were living in one part of the United States, and you were homeschooled, and you learned to play the cello at 8 years old with your feet.
I had to learn to do things differently. I had to learn how to use my feet and really use what I have instead of focusing on what I don't have to accomplish things that everybody does every day, like getting dressed, brushing my teeth, taking a shower, making food, packing my backpack, doing everything that everybody else does. And my parents were really instrumental in helping me do that. And they helped me also figure things out too. And one of those things was music. My parents noticed early on that I was musical. And the story they tell is that I would be very young, and I'd watch a movie like a Disney movie or Star Wars, and I would go to the piano and play the music from that movie. And they signed me up to take music lessons with a teacher at our church. And, you know, I think one very neat thing I'd like to throw out about this time for me was this teacher, she took it upon herself to learn how to play an instrument with her own feet before even attempting to teach me. She learned how to do this, and then we worked together really, and figured out more ways to do the notes and to do everything that I needed to do.
There was a lot of hardship you also had to go through. Your parents raised you to be resilient, and you know, as you said, you do everything everyone else does, but you just do it differently. Yeah. And yet, around middle school, so grade 7 and 8, you guys had to move, and for the first time, you went to public school, and you experienced a whole other level of resistance and pain that you hadn't experienced before.
So for me, being in middle school for the first time, public middle school in this new state, and surrounded by all these new people, and this bullying that I started to experience in school, and really beginning to question who I am and question my purpose, question if God is real, if God even loves me, if He's good, because I didn't understand why God made me this way, why God made me without arms. And I began to have doubts and fears and just a lot of anger built up, and it brought me to a very low and dark place in my life where I really just hated myself, and I hated the way God made me. And, you know, I stopped thinking about how good God was, and I started thinking about how bad my life seemed to be. Life just felt like a mistake for me. And I really began to question my own identity, you know, and even going back to me being adopted and me being a Romanian who was in an orphanage, and thinking that my own parents didn't even want me, and now I'm here in this school, and nobody cares about me. Nobody wants me here. People just think I'm a freak. So I really struggled with, why am I even here? Do I even belong here? Do I matter? And it's a hard place to be, but I think it's a place that we all find ourselves at some point in our lives. And I think what matters is, where do we go for those answers, and where do we go for the truth?
Yeah. And you started to speak to God, at least. You started to say, you kind of challenging him and saying, move in specific ways. Answer me if you're a good God, if you're real. Tell us a bit more about those moments you finally reached out to God, but even in a combative way.
I was really having a hard time with all of this, because I didn't understand why, if Jesus loves all the little children, then why did he forget to put arms on me? Or why did he choose me to not have arms? And I didn't really understand that. So I did get to this place in probably high school where I started to talk to God and just be really angry. And I said, okay, God, if you are so good and if you are real, then fix this for me. Fix my life. Give me a miracle. And even more so, I was going to church, and I was still looking at my Bible and seeing times in the Bible when Jesus himself was healing people, when he was healing people's disabilities. Mm-hmm. And I was this disabled kid alone in my room, crying and hating myself. And I started to tell God, I said, if you are so real, and if you are so good, and if you are so loving, then heal my disability. Then make me wake up tomorrow with arms. It was kind of my bargaining chip with God, saying, see, if you would do this for me, then I'd be happy. Then I would be normal just like everybody else. I'd get what I want. And then then I could go testify that to everybody. So I wanted God to do this miracle in my life, and he never did. He never gave me arms, and he never made me normal just like everybody else. But he had something very different in mind.
Well, he did, and you had quite the breaking point and the turning point. One day in youth group, you heard a youth pastor talking about a specific Bible verse, which really brought to light that maybe God was going to use you differently. And you didn't have this miracle in your limbs, but you had a miracle in your heart.
Yeah.
Tell us about what happened.
Yeah, exactly. And it was really in the book of John, chapter 9, when Jesus and his disciples see the blind man on the side of the road, and the disciples ask Jesus about this blind man. They see him, and they question kind of, well, what happened to him? Why does he not have arms? And then they go on to say, did he sin, or did his parents sin? And I'll just say, it's so interesting, because for me, I get asked questions all the time. It's just part of my life. Ever since I was a little kid, other kids would come up to me and say, what happened to your arms? Where are your arms? And even still, I'm an adult, and adults come up to me and they say, can I ask what happened? Can I ask what happened to you? And, I have a much better attitude about it now than I did as a kid, as a teenager. But all that to say, reading the Bible, this ancient text, the Bible, and seeing the disciples also ask about a disabled man, it just really connected with me. But anyways, and they ask if he sinned or if his parents sinned, and then Jesus very simply says that nobody sinned, but he sinned so that the works of God could be seen through him, so that God could use him, God could work through him. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, for me, it was reading that when those wheels began to turn, and I began to think, well, maybe God can use me. Mm-hmm. Maybe even though I don't have arms, maybe God can use me. And it took me a while to get to this place where I began to accept the fact that I don't have arms, accept who I am, and even be thankful for the way God made me. Because you read further in this chapter, and Jesus heals the blind man. So that's really, I read that whole passage in youth group, and then it was after that where I said, okay, God, you healed the blind man, so give me arms. Yeah. But it was just so amazing the way that God works, because he didn't give me arms, but he ended up giving me eyes, mm-hmm. and gave me a new set of eyes, a holy set of eyes where my whole life has been, okay, Lord, use me. The works of God could be seen through him in a mighty way.
Yeah. It's an interesting concept too, when you talk about, in some of your speeches, you talk about disability and how it's not exactly what we think it is. In fact, we all carry a specific disability that we're sharing together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. One of my favorite things to do when I'm speaking to a group of people is I love looking at the crowd and saying, and I'm not the only disabled person in here. And of course, what I mean by that is that we're all different, we're all unique, and we all have challenges, we all have struggles. And, and for me, when I was going through this time and the Lord really changed my heart, and not just changed my heart, but he changed my mind, it's a different way of thinking. I began to realize that, honestly, for me, it was never about not having arms, to be honest. I think not having arms was the excuse that I had, maybe. But, I figured it out. Like, I drive with my feet. I travel from the U.S. to now Canada with no arms, and go through the airport and customs, and I do all of that with no arms. So I figured that out. So I was asking the Lord to heal my disability. And of course, I kept saying, heal my disability, which meant give me arms. But the Lord really did heal my disability, and my disability being what goes on the inside, and what my own struggles, my own heart, and really my own sin. And that's really something that we all have. We all are born with sin. We all have anxiety. We all struggle with anger and depression and frustration and stress, and not being able to control ourselves, and not being able to stop from making mistakes sometimes. We all struggle, and we all live in a sinful and broken world. Too often do we reject God and go towards things that we think will give us hope momentarily, and they might momentarily, but eventually we find ourselves back to the place of feeling hopeless.
And George, now you tour, and you go to different churches and organizations, and you speak and you perform, and your message really is one of hope. And in our final moments here together, for that viewer watching right now who's feeling hopeless and like there's no way forward or out of whatever they're experiencing, what would you say to them?
For me, my life didn't immediately change. My life didn't immediately get better when the Lord opened my eyes and kind of helped reshape my heart. So my circumstances didn't change, is what I'm saying. I still didn't have arms. I still went to school the next day and got bullied. I still got called names. I still got left alone and sat alone at lunch, but my perspective changed. Perspective really matters, and really having a holy perspective, and an eternal perspective. And when you're going through the hardest seasons in life and the biggest challenges in life, remembering and keeping it at the forefront of your focus that God is in control, that God has a plan, that he has a purpose, and really he is the ultimate artist in this painting that we live in, that being our life. And we, as humans, we're so momentary, where we only see what happens right now, at this moment, what's going on right now, and we react to what's going on right now. And that's a very human thing. But the Lord, he sees the whole picture, and he's painting the whole picture. So for me, it kind of got to a point where I said, don't I want to rest in that? Like if I know that God is in control, and he is perfect, and he has the best interest in the best interest for me, then shouldn't I want to find my comfort and find my peace and find my hope in that? And that would be my encouragement to anybody today, is just find that hope, find that comfort in the fact that God is taking care of you, that he has it under control, and that he is the one who's putting the pieces together. And right now it might seem hopeless, it might look hopeless, but one day you'll be able to look back and say, look, God carried me through this.
Yes. Oh, George, that's such a good word of encouragement, and I'm so thankful for your time with us here, for your story, for the way you glorify God in every way and at every turn. Thank you so much for this time together.
Absolutely, and thank you for letting me come on and share my story and share with anybody who's watching.
Well, we're excited that you're going to be singing for us a bit later.
Yes, me too.
Well, if George's story has been an encouragement to you, if you find yourself in a dark place and you wonder, how do I move out of where I am? We just want to encourage you that you are not alone, that God loves you, he is with you. Begin to read your Bible, consider Jesus, and Jesus can bring the hope and the strength that you need to move forward into the future. And of course, our prayer partners are there. Please call 1-866-273-4444.